Just a quick warning, if you're put off by gross medical footage or don't like the idea of worms, spiders, ants, anything like that coming out of this general area of the human body, this video is not for you. But for the rest of you who are really excited by those things, get ready in 3, 2... Do you guys remember those scholastic fairs where they would sell the books? Elementary school, maybe middle school. I don't know what some of your deals were. But I was looking through my parents' house the other day, and I found my favorite book of all time. Where's the title? Mini Monsters. Brought me back to this wonderful time in my life where I knew the names of every single insect. Anywhere I went on vacation, I knew those insects too. So, in celebration of that time, to reawaken it and to bring some of that magic to you, I've done a lot of research and put this disturbing Bugs and Parasites iceberg together. We're just going to go through it. 2 rules. Viruses actually don't count, bacteria neither, because those are technically not living animals. And I am including spiders as bugs, even though it's a bit of a stretch. Scorpions too. Okay, starting with tier 1. Silverfish. Silverfish are a species of wingless insects that are considered household pets. You've probably seen some of these skittering along your bathtub. When you turn the light on, it runs away. That's because they are solely nocturnal and extremely annoying for that fact, and the fact that they love to eat paper. Anything you have, your tax slips gone, rare collectibles, trading cards, say goodbye to those. They're also quite agile, just generally extremely annoying to catch. The death's head moth is a species of moth that has become famous, or rather infamous, for its unique thorax marking, which some people have rightfully compared to the human skull. I mean, I mainly put this on the list because of Silence of the Lambs, and if you do not get that reference, you need to watch that movie right after you're finished watching this video. Harvestman bugs. Oh, harvestman bugs, better known by their adult film star name, Daddy Longlegs. They are a species of spider-like arachnids, not technically spiders, which fossil records indicate may be as old as 400 million years. They're actually quite beneficial, not harmful. They just look a little creepy, but their fangs are too small to bite humans, but they can eat a ton of other troublesome stuff that spiders do, like fungus, worms, other insects, and bird droppings. Yum yum. Bed bugs are gross, and if you've ever actually had to deal with them, you probably think they belong on tier 6. They tend to hang out in only the darkest spaces, wall cracks, and of course your mattress. And they can survive without feeding for 2 months, so they've got that going in their favor. The reason they're not in tier 6 is because at worst their bite can result in just a little bit of soreness and maybe blistering. But really, when they all get together and that infestation gets going, it is just nasty. Okay, fire ants. Wow, love this one. More aggressive than regular ants, and they're known to inject a venom called solenopsin through their stingers. Not their fangs, actually, which is interesting. They sting. Solenopsin is powerful enough to kill small animals and can also be very painful to humans, which I know because my cousin and I thought it would be a great idea to just plunge our hand right into a fire ant hill when we were 8 years old, and solenopsin. That'll get you. Trust me. In my opinion, if you have never had a tick, you probably need to go out into the woods a little bit more in life. They are parasitic arachnids that latch onto a host's skin and feed on the blood for as long as they can. They can unfortunately spread diseases, Lyme's disease being the most infamous, and also if left unattended, they can just balloon into these grotesque monstrosities. It's not good at all. I think there's something unnerving about animals that almost perfectly mimic other animals, which is why the ant mimic spider is on here. I mean, imagine if you were an ant and you saw this thing. It looks almost exactly like an ant, except it has those 2 extra limbs. This is like the perfect uncanny valley horror movie for ants. I wonder if they ever sneak into ant colonies and just wreak havoc. Also, look at those jaws. They are just disproportionately bigger than an average spider's in the worst way. Lice are similar to ticks. They're parasitic and feed on human blood. They're just insects instead of arachnids. Huge difference. They can commonly be found inhabiting the human head, and people used to make fun of me all the time because of my hair. You know, it's a little unkempt, so me having hair lice was the rumor. Tons of bad memories. Lice also cannot be mentioned without mentioning pubic lice, otherwise known as crabs, which is a form of lice that inhabits the hair in the knotty bits. From lice to the louse fly. This is another parasitic insect that feeds on blood. This time it just happens to fly, which is marvelous. Fortunately, they don't feed on humans, but they are known to invade barns in large numbers and feed on horses. Once a louse fly invasion is afoot, they are incredibly difficult to deal with, and they can severely impact the mental health of your horse if you have one, or any of your other barn animals if you have them. So it is important to notice the signs of a louse fly invasion and quickly call someone. The giant water bug, or toe biter, earns its nickname from its tendency to inflict a painful, though thankfully non-venomous, bite to people's feet while they wade through water. They have incredibly large pincer-like rostrums, which they use to inflict the bite, and they can walk, fly, or swim just about anywhere, but being freshwater insects, they spend most of their time in ponds. Also, we of course must look at a picture of how they give birth, because that is the worst thing I've ever seen in my entire life. Trapdoor spiders are another uncanny valley animal because, imagine to other spiders, they have their fangs pointed downwards from their head instead of right on their face pointing each other like this. Must be really creepy. Cool. They're most famous for these trapdoor-like mechanics that they construct under the earth instead of webs to catch their prey. And once they get them, they just inject them with that paralyzing toxin. You know how it is. The giraffe weevil is an animal that is, hate to be honest, only on here for how it looks. I'm sorry, but that is just the OG sad boy of the bug community if I've ever seen one. It's a true Tim Burton character. It's not large or venomous or anything, but if it was giant, believe me, it would get a tier of its own underneath all of the other tiers. That neck, man, is just something else. Of course, we have to look at some pictures of the giraffe weevil mating because this video is all about self-punishment. Ringworm. Ringworm is a parasitic fungus. Most people have probably had it. I know I had it when I was a kid. It was the first parasite I ever got. Yippee! So I thought it was the complete shit and just started showing it off at school. I know Mr. Popular over here. It's a mild annoyance, but it is very contagious. Luckily, though, it does not harm anything besides your reputation for the rest of your school career. Okay, tier 2. We're going to see a lot of giants in this tier, starting with the rock scorpion. This is the largest scorpion in the world, measuring in at a modest 9 inches. Still longer than my whole hand, so definitely. I just see the missed potential for a joke there, but this is an educational program, so we're not delving into that. Fortunately, its venom is very weak, sensation being less painful than the average bee sting, so I guess Indiana Jones was right. Next up we have the largest spider in the world, the Goliath bird eater. Measuring in at 11 inches, this one is big enough to be confused for a small cat, and is in fact recommended as a pet for veteran bug owners. Like most tarantulas, its venom isn't potent to humans, but it would hurt like a wasp sting, so just a little bit worse than the rock scorpion. Flesh flies. How wonderful. As the name implies, the flesh fly just loves laying its eggs under some animal's skin by flying in through open wounds. Not humans, although we'll definitely be touching on some flies that love laying their eggs in humans later, so don't worry on that front. Eating food infected with flesh fly larvae can result in some severe illnesses, so watch what you eat. The praying mantis is oh so benign and endangered, but I just had to put it on because those 4 legs are so gorgeous. Its method of capturing prey is famous, and it may have the most otherworldly appearance of the entire bug community, which is saying a lot. But I am going to ruin the praying mantis forever for you right now by telling you that its closest relative is the cockroach. The toad bug. Like spiders, they deliver a powerful toxin. In the toad bug's case, it can both paralyze and melt the flesh of its victims. Amazing. They live along muddy water banks and have a nasty bite similar to the giant water bug. They also share the giant water bug's method of childbirth, which is still terrifying. The Titan beetle, one of the world's largest beetles at 17 inches. Its only contestant is the Hercules beetle. However, the Hercules beetle does cheat with that harmless horn on its head, making up a significant half of its length, whereas the Titan beetle's not harmless at all mandibles are capable of slicing through pencil wood and human flesh. The African giant millipede can grow up to 1 foot in length, and like the Goliath bird-eater spider, can be kept as a pet if you are a literal freak. Also, I learned during my research that millipedes are actually arthropods, so they're more closely related to crabs than flies and ants, but I mean, honestly, if you saw this thing, you would immediately assume it's an insect, so it's staying on. Sorry. The Amazonian giant centipede can also grow up to 1 foot in length, but it can definitely not be kept as a pet. I don't know what it is. Centipedes are always a lot scarier than millipedes. I mean, it could be the appearance, but it could also be this Wikipedia passage about the Amazonian giant centipede that reads as follows. It is a carnivore that feeds on any other animal it can overpower and kill. It is capable of overpowering not only other invertebrates such as large insects, spiders, millipedes, scorpions, and even tarantulas, but also small vertebrates including small lizards, frogs up to 95 millimeters or 3.5 inches long, snakes up to 25 centimeters or 10 inches long, sparrow-sized birds, mice, and bats. Amazing. The scorpion fly. Like the giraffe weevil, this one is just another weird looker, but I promise it's the last one. To be fair though, they mate with their little scorpion-looking tails, which is just disturbing in all the right ways. Honestly, in that Tim Burton movie starring the giraffe weevil, this is not my pitch, but this is kind of my pitch. I think the scorpion fly would be the giraffe weevil's sidekick. Speaking of that Tim Burton movie, we have the harlequin beetle. The main body can grow up to around 4 inches, but the male's little front arms can extend a lot further than that. It's not as large as the Titan or Hercules beetle, but if I was asleep and I woke up to see any of them on my ceiling, I would pray to God it is not the harlequin beetle, because it is just an absolute nightmare creature. The vampire moth is a species of moth known to drink blood, including human blood, and that's about all anyone needs to know about it. Parasitoid is an umbrella term for any animal that lays its eggs/larvae under another animal or in it. There are plenty of parasitoids on this list, but I'm going to bunch all the wasps here together because none of them really interact with humans in any significant way, so here is where they will remain. But I am giving special mention to the Ichneumon wasp because it has the most buck-wild badonk in the entire bug community, and it's absolutely terrifying because that is what it uses to lay its eggs into other animals. Just lovely. Also, I have personal experience with this one because it was all the rage in elementary school and my friends and I thought it could actually lay eggs in humans, and this culminated in 5th grade when one happened to fly into my yard while my friend and I were playing, which of course tragically ended with us capturing it, freezing it in a water bottle, and keeping it for the next 13 years until my family moved. So yeah, the Ichneumon wasp kind of contributed to this Shakespearean drama in my life. The slave maker ant. The slave maker ant is what is known as a brood parasite. It will invade the colonies of other ants, steal their young, then raise them as their own worker ants. I'm sure there's a whole ugly world of ant politics that's waiting to have its own 2-hour video essay on it, but unfortunately we're covering the whole bug community today. Okay, going into tier 3 now. This is when some of the nastier ones start to come. Starting with the blister beetle, which is unique in that it doesn't rely on a bite or sting to scare away predators. Instead, it secretes an agent called canatharidin from all over their body, which causes intense blistering whenever touched. Encounters with the blister beetle has even caused hospitalization in the worst cases, so please, if you see any gem-colored beetles, stay away. They're not worth any money. Nobody wants them. Hookworm. So this is where it officially begins. Our first worm. I hate all of these. Hookworm is actively infesting about 700 million people in the world right now. They live in the small intestine and their larvae are passed through feces. The way it works is when an infected person defecates outside, the feces will eventually run into the soil and become fertilizer. But the larva can survive in the ground, so if you're walking barefoot on contaminated soil, you will join the elite estimated 700 million people infected with hookworm by then, just going right up. As far as effects go, I mean, it's gross and can cause mild gastrointestinal symptoms, but it's not too bad. But brace yourselves, because we're just getting in to the fucking worms. Mites. Mites are tiny little arachnids, which are... I lost mites. Oh. Mites. Mites are tiny little arachnids which have a tendency to bite and infect humans, causing some pretty serious rashes. The scariest to me is the Scabies mite, because it looks like an absolute villain and can survive in nearly any climate. It also leads to its own brand of mite rash, specifically called Scabies, which is highly contagious and terrorizes people all across the planet. But, I mean, props to the Scabies mite for getting that name brand deal with the CDC, I guess. The Death Stalker Scorpion. I mean, if you have that name and you are not one of the deadliest scorpions in the world, just shame on you. Luckily, it is. Unluckily for us. I guess luckily for the Death Stalker Scorpion. It contains powerful neurotoxins and has one of the most painful stings in the world. Although it's not usually deadly, it does pose a fatal risk to young children and those with pre-existing heart conditions. Also, it's possible to be allergic to the neurotoxins, which greatly increases the risk of death as well. The tongue-eating louse. The tarantula hawk has an impressive 4.0 on the Schmidt index attributed to its sting. This is the highest level of pain possible to score on the Schmidt index of stings, with the inventor of the index, Schmidt himself, describing it like so. Pure, intense, brilliant pain, like walking over flaming charcoal with a 3-inch nail embedded in your heel. And sharing that coveted 4.0 spot with the tarantula hawk is the bullet ant. I think the bullet ant is kind of the unofficial mascot for the 4.0 Schmidt rating. A lot of this has to do with the Sataru Moe people of the Amazon. See, they have this regular ritual where they'll fill a glove with thousands of bullet ants, and then young men have to place their hands in these gloves and get stung and show no signs of emotional distress or physical pain. So I think that's a pretty good reason to place it slightly above the tarantula hawk. Also, Coyote Peterson said so.
Oh my god, it is really bad! Oh my gosh, I think it has the tarantula hawk topped!
The guinea worm is actually still a very big problem in the global community, with organizations like UNICEF having ongoing efforts to eradicate it. It can spread in water sources that are contaminated fairly easily, so unfortunately it hits very hard in low-income areas. Once infected, the worm will lay dormant and won't start showing symptoms until adulthood, which can take up to a full year. And the worms can grow up to 3 feet inside the human body. Unfortunately, there is neither a vaccine nor treatment available yet to combat this parasite. Universally considered to be the goat of all parasites, the tapeworm is a truly revolting creature that is caused by eating or drinking anything contaminated with its larva. The worms will then start living in your intestines and mature into adulthood, at which point they can remain inside you for up to 30 years and grow up to a length of 30 feet. Wow, your small intestine has a lot of space. Inside your small intestine, they pose little threat, but if the larva ruptures through and forms cysts in other parts of your body, it can lead to seizures and your organs exploding. Great. Noah really chose the winners for the arc. Just need a moment. My throat is a little off to wet my whistle. Okay. Tier 4, starting with Leucochloridium paradoxum, and you know it's serious when it literally only has a scientific name. This parasite commonly infects snails, with its infant form developing in brood sacs in the snail's eyes. Now, these brood sacs have a particular strange pulsating feature which causes them to respond to light. Birds will then see the snail in pain with these brood sacs about to tear through its head, and confuse the overinflated eye stalks with the brood sacs for worms, which causes the bird to eat the snail whole, RIP, which then allows the brood sacs to hatch in the bird's stomach and grow into adulthood in the bird's intestines, eventually laying their eggs in the bird's feces and starting the whole cycle all over again, as these parasites tend to go. Saculina is a type of parasitic barnacle that preys on crabs. It will affect typically female crabs and develop its own brood sac system known as externa, which spreads into the crab's reproductive tubes and replaces them. So it replaces a female crab's reproductive organs with its own brood sacs, effectively turning that crab into a Saculina larva breeding machine. And fun fact, if it accidentally infects a male crab, it will alter its hormonal cycle and turn it into a female crab, so it can still breed its Saculina larva. It's definitely one of the most interesting parasite effects on the iceberg. And it's a barnacle, which is a first. Loa Loa is an infamous worm that can be contracted through mangrove flies. Although Loa Loa isn't contagious, it causes discomfort in the form of loiasis. This is where the Loa Loa gets its nickname, eyeworm. Yep, it's that one. It tends to gravitate towards people's eyeballs, and it's hard to remove as it will flee back under the skin at the first sign of light. Just hate it. You're ready for this one. The vampire fish, also known as kangaroo, is a tiny parasitic catfish that is known to latch onto larger fish. However, it's also widely feared by humans across the Amazon River for just maybe the worst reason in the entire video. Given its small size and nimble swimming speed, it's been known to occasionally swim up urine streams of people peeing into the Amazon, enter their urethra, and lodge itself inside the shaft of their private parts. And once inside someone's privates, the kangaroo will immediately die, but its body does have to be surgically removed, which I can only imagine is a horrifying procedure. The brown recluse spider. Now, the brown recluse is a spider known for its particular brand of necrotic venom, which is something out of Final Fantasy, and no one can convince me otherwise. The venom is actually a breakdown agent, and there are several cases of people's skin literally melting when getting bitten by it, which is just absolutely horrifying. And I have some personal experience with this one because I was vacationing with my cousin down south once. Of course, he's involved in all of these stories because we just got up to all kinds of nonsense as kids. We were in the pool of the hotel. There was a floaty ball that we used to throw at each other. And this particular morning, I picked this floaty ball up from the pool. I turned it over, and there was this massive brown recluse spider just lying in wait under the floaty ball. So I took one look at it. I threw it right at my cousin's face. Just kidding. I threw it way out into the woods because I'm not dealing with a brown recluse. No way. Cordyceps is a parasitic fungus known to infect various bugs. Once a bug is infected, the cordyceps fungus will enter and hijack its central nervous system, traveling up to its brain and eventually taking control of all of its motor functions. It'll then section this bug off from the rest of its colony or tribe, and the bug will die and become a node from which to spread other cordyceps fungus. The cool thing is, not cool for ants, ants are so frequently the victims of cordyceps that whenever an ant is infected, the other members of its colony will recognize that it's infected, and they will pick it up and carry it out into the wilderness to die alone. So tragic. I told you there was an entire world of ant politics that remained untapped on YouTube. Toxoplasma gondii has the cordyceps mind-altering ability, except it affects humans. Oh joy. When ingested through undercooked or otherwise unsanitary food, Toxoplasma gondii will attack the human body and induce toxoplasmosis. What starts out as flu-like symptoms will eventually deteriorate into blurred vision and severe brain damage. And in the most severe cases, the Toxoplasma gondii can affect the host's motor function and even alter their genes. I hope you guys are cool with a quick outfit change. I just realized after filming everything that I completely forgot about the filariasis worm. I know I'm very sorry if the filariasis worm is your favorite parasite on the planet, but in return you can see the actual most dangerous creature on planet Earth, my forehead. Anyways, the filariasis worm is a microscopic worm that invades the bloodstream of its host through fly bites. Once inside, the worms will attach to the lymph node system, can cause a fluid buildup that can eventually lead to some pretty terrifying conditions like advanced elephantitis. So this is the most famous bug on Earth and in the entire universe. The thing is, as with most spiders, the black widow won't really inflict a venomous bite. It first inflicts a threatening, non-venomous bite to get you to back off. The only time spiders will really go for the kill first is if you somehow mess with their web. And unfortunately, I have experience with this as well, because on that same vacation, one of my other cousins was sitting on her blanket on the beach, and she had this black spider wandering around. She didn't like it. I came to take a look at it, and I picked it up. Terrible idea. and I saw this pure black spider on its back, just pure black. And I was looking at it because this was my peak of bug knowledge. I was like, what spider is this? And I turn it over and see that red hourglass on the bottom of its abdomen. There was a lot of throwing potentially fatal spiders on that vacation. Speaking of potentially fatal, the black widow is iffy on the potentially fatal part. If it does inflict a full venom bite, it will act as a neurological agent and affect the muscles and heart. It can be incredibly painful, and again, like with the Deathstalker scorpion, fatal for young children and those with any pre-existing conditions. The Glyptopanthes wasp. So I kind of lied when I said there were no parasitoid wasps later on in the list, but this one deserves its spot in Tier 4 because when injected into other insects, its larva will release a special toxin that, here we go again, affects the host's central nervous system, causing a degree of control over its actions. So the Glyptopanthes wasp is kind of like a flying cordyceps injector. Terrible. Okay, I think it's safe to move on to Tier 5 now, starting with the spitting thick-tail black scorpion, which makes it to Tier 5 simply because it has the audacity to have 5 names. I mean, spitting thick-tail black scorpion. You really could just have one of those and scorpion. It's ridiculous. Anyways, it also is here because it has a venom that's as potent as cyanide, and it can fire that venom from its tail accurately up to a distance of 1 meter. But really just the name. I mean, absurd. I don't really want to talk about this next one, because in my mind, these kinds of things don't even deserve our recognition. But they exist for some reason, so here we go. Screwworm. Screwworm flies will enter the human body and inject hundreds of eggs, which hatch within a day. And once those larvae are active, they will immediately set about devouring human flesh. Very quickly, a screwworm infestation can be very fatal if untreated. They enter through open wounds, so for the love of God, just wear a band-aid. Please. The tsetse fly is a type of biting fly that inhabits Africa, and it carries something called trypanosome. If you do come into contact with trypanosome when you're bitten by a tsetse fly, you can come down with something called sleeping sickness, which is an illness with terrible symptoms that may also prove fatal. Chagas bug is the same as tsetse fly. It's called the kissing bug. It inhabits South America and Central America instead of Africa, and it just carries trypanosome again. So if you are bitten by a Chagas bug, you have a likelihood of coming down with sleeping sickness. Jacolepturus reneniae is one of our 2 prehistoric bugs. You'll find they're both here for very compelling reasons. This one is a sea scorpion that could grow up to 8 feet. I mean, can you imagine? We saw the biggest modern scorpion earlier in Tier 2 at 9 inches. Imagine something that's more than 10 times that size. Just crazy. Arthropleura is a little bit scarier than the Jacolepturus reneniae because it's 9 feet long and it's a giant millipede. So I am officially rescinding anything I ever said earlier about millipedes being friendly, because by God, if I saw this thing, I think I would try to die before it could kill me in any way. So pinworms are not the most deadly worm, or the grossest. That honor definitely goes to screwworms. And I was going to put botfly on the list, but screwworms just blew them out of the water, and they kind of do a similar thing, so botfly honorable mention if you want to look it up and find all about it. People go crazy over the botfly. It's huge. But pinworms, they have a little quirk about them. Very quirky. First of all, they're the most common type of parasitic worm in the United States, which is where I live, so fantastic. And second of all, they only infect the anus, penis, or vagina. And when you're infected, you'll have thousands of eggs laying down there. You can come up with all nasty stuff like urinary tract infection. Just, you know what? I take it back. I think it might be the grossest, just for the pure sadism of it. We gotta get mini monsters out for this one. Because I'll tell you, when I was a kid and I first learned about the Brazilian wandering spider, I thought that I was the coolest fucking thing on the planet, because I knew that somewhere out there, and really anywhere out there, because the Brazilian wandering spider, as the name would suggest, loves to wander, is the most dangerous species of spider in the world. Fast and aggressive, has excellent eyesight, carries a deadly toxin. Yes, it is deadly. They have the largest venom glands of any spider, and a full dose is easily enough to kill any adult human. And the other funny little thing about the Brazilian wandering spider is, yes, it did wander its way up into the United States of America. Amazing. So, a lot of you guys are probably looking at Tier 6 right now and thinking to yourselves, I know a lot of these. These are not the scariest bugs in the world. Some of these even might live in my apartment. And, first of all, call an exterminator, because you're about to find out why. I'm going to go through each one of these, and I'm going to give my reasoning for why they're here in Tier 6. Starting with fleas. They spread the fucking Black Plague, which killed 100 million people, by some historians' estimates. They also spread the guinea worm, which in its own right was a Tier 3 parasite, so I don't think much more explanation is needed there. Mosquitoes. When they bite you, there's a possibility they're carrying something called Plasmodium, which is responsible for the malaria virus, which kills 700,000 people every year globally. It's actually the reason that the mosquito has been named the deadliest animal in history. So the brain-eating amoeba is the deadliest parasite on the list. It lives in freshwater bodies in the southern United States, and if you go dunking your head in contaminated water, it'll travel through the nose up into the brain, where it basically does what it promises to with its name. It doesn't have any sort of controlling effect like cordyceps or Toxoplasma gondii. It's just solely interested in absolutely destroying your brain. It's very fatal, almost immediately. And also, it kind of looks like that guy Joker from the movie Joker. And finally, ending our journey righteously, we have the cockroach, because one time I saw one crawling in my apartment and I got scared. Also, it says they're omnivores that have been recorded to eat human beings, both living and dead. There's that too. I mean, I think there's probably a reason why the cockroach is the bug with the single most old wives' tales told about it. It's just like the most hated thing on Earth since Earth began. The only thing worse than a cockroach is one that fucking whispers to you. Actually, no. I apologize, I take that back. The only thing worse than a cockroach is the actual final entry on our list, the Manipulator modificaputus, which was a prehistoric cockroach with praying mantis arms. Thanks for watching. Just kidding, the video is not over yet, because I'm actually coming right back at you with an extension of the Bugs and Parasites Iceberg. A lot has changed since I created that first part. Got a new fade, which is good. I'm not sure what the hell I was thinking with that bowl cut hairstyle in the first one, but I guess it did match the energy in a certain way. Anyways, we've got some extra tiers, starting off with our bonus tier, which is a couple of items that I forgot to include the first time around, which really do bear mentioning. Earwigs have got to be one of the most hated and feared insects globally, largely due to the infamous legend that gives them their name, that they're capable of burrowing into the human ear and either eating or laying eggs in parts of our brain. This is, suffice to say, not true and pure anti-earwig propaganda. It's just a legend. But you know what is true about these creepy crawlers, and perhaps even more frightening than that legend? The fact that young earwigs participate in the practice of matrophagy, meaning that when they come of age, they collectively eat and devour their own mothers. This practice isn't uncommon in other bugs, especially species of spider. You know, the last thing that kind of frightens me and skeeves me out about earwigs is those pincers on their rear end, which is an appendage that they have complete control over, allowing them to pinch humans and hang on to them with their buggy butts, but they rarely, if ever, draw blood. Still, skeeves me out. Vinegaroons are a very interesting looking species of
arachnid that caused quite a bit of confusion to me when I was a young guy due to our old friend Mini Monsters here. Because look, on page 51, they have the tailless whip spider. Then, on page 79, they have the giant whip scorpion. Both of them have the same exact drawing. My friends and I were completely baffled by this. It was the talk of the town. We later found out that both of them are vinegaroons, and then that led to further confusion because we thought that it had something to do with Vigoroth from the Pokemon series, which led to me thinking that it was a mammal and not an arachnid. When I was very young, of course. I'm now far past that confusion. I know everything there is to know about vinegaroons. I've rigorously studied them. Anyways, vinegaroons are known for their bizarre and complex concoction of body parts. They have scorpion-like arms, spider-like mouthpieces, antennae that look like an octopus, and a tail that's fuzzy like a small rodent. But they're not any of those. They're not a spider or a scorpion. They're just a vinegaroon. They have the ability to spit an acid from their rear end near their whip-like tail, which gives them their name that can be irritating to human skin, although they're not especially venomous. The Dobson fly is an intimidating species of flying insect that can measure up to 5 inches long. And now that may not seem that big compared to some of the largest insects and bugs that we've talked about, but you have to remember that these have the distinction of being able to fly and hanging out in groups around still bodies of water. They also have proportionally large mandibles that they can use to bite human beings when threatened, and their bite is noted to be quite painful, although they're not venomous, so you won't have any long-lasting effects. Just imagine being swarmed by a group of Dobson flies on your next romantic lakeside picnic, and I think you can envision why people find this one to be especially frightening. Meganeuropsis permiana is a species of prehistoric dragonfly, our last real prehistoric bug on the Iceberg vid. It was known to reach sizes of up to 2 feet long, and that is impressive and quite frightening, but I remember a bunch of legends about dragonflies reaching up to 40 feet long when I was a kid. I guess now that I'm an adult, that does sound a bit ridiculous. And we have Megaguirus from Godzilla to scratch that itch. 2 feet long is still impressive. Very impressive, in fact, to the point that Meganeuropsis permiana is the largest insect in recorded history. And I know what you're saying. Wait a second. We looked at creatures that were 9 feet long in prehistoric times in our previous tiers, but remember that those were all arthropods and arachnids, not technically insects, although they all fall under the umbrella of bugs for us. I feel like I'm forgetting one. Termites, right? Why are termites on here? I mean, termites are a household pest, right? They devour wood and denigrate the structures of people's houses and other man-made constructions. They're really annoying, but there has to be something else putting them above all the other insects and making it onto the iceberg. What could it be? Could it maybe have to do with the termite queen? Respectfully, but I'm looking at that badonk. The jewel wasp, or emerald cockroach wasp, is a particularly nightmarish parasitoid wasp with an absolutely beastly method of rearing its youth. The jewel wasp will seek out and sting a cockroach, incapacitating it, and then bite off its antennae before dragging the cockroach back to the jewel wasp's nest. At this point, the cockroach will be implanted with the jewel wasp's larvae, and the larva has the unique property of growing through its first 2 stages of development, the larval and cocoon stage, within the cockroach's body, all while the cockroach devours and absorbs nutrient at the larva's beck and call under its control. When the cocoon is ready to hatch, an adult jewel wasp emerges from the cockroach's body, finally killing it and ready to fly out of the nest, and restart this entire brutal cycle. It really is enough to make you pity the cockroach. Almost. Phasmid is an umbrella term for insects that have the ability to mimic sticks, twigs, and leaves, more commonly known as stick bugs. They range in size from under ½ of an inch long to, brace yourself, the largest insect in recorded modern history, the Phobaticus chani, at just about 2 feet long. Wow, I have seen a lot of phasmids in bug museums, and they do tend to be very large, around 1 foot to 2 feet big. Anyways, these ones are often kept as pets as well, and this time I'm not judging. I actually understand the appeal. Phasmids are quite cool, and they're very non-threatening and harmless to human beings. The Antarctic midge is a teeny tiny species of flightless fly measuring at only 3 millimeters long, but despite this, the fact that it's developed and adapted for centuries to be able to be one of the only animals that's able to survive in the Antarctic has given it the impressive title of the largest land animal in the Antarctic, very ironically. Is it worth it to be a flightless fly? I mean, that's even more ironic. I don't know. You be the judge. Wettas are another species of insect that have an incredible capacity to resist the cold. The mountain stone wetta in particular has the ability to produce proteins within its cells that completely stop ice crystals from forming there. So essentially the creature can become frozen over and encapsulated in ice during the winter and cease all bodily functions but survive. Then when spring comes along and it gets thawed out, it resumes all bodily functions and continues on as if it wasn't just frozen for 4 to 6 months. This has led to some coining the wetta as a creature that can die and then come back to life. Very angelic and mystical, although I'd argue with the angelic tag because wettas are able to reach impressive sizes, sometimes being compared to large rodents and gerbils, and is also kept as a pet. Unlike the phasmid, I think I'm going to have to pass on this one. It doesn't have like the art of mimicry to it, and they also get quite broad. I would not want that thing in my room at night. No, sir. Slugs, I think we can consider under our umbrella of bugs, although they are more closely related to oysters and mollusks, sea creatures. But I consider slugs to be bugs when I see them. So why are they here? They're slimy and they can be disgusting, but they can also be quite cute. They can be kept as pets, which actually is one that I had when I was a kid. I did have a pet slug for about 6 months or so, and fun fact, or not so fun, I brought it to my local church's pet blessing ceremony. The pastor there was, I think we could use the word disappointed in me. But anyways, slugs can have a much darker side, as seen in the case of Sam Ballard, an Australian man who ate a slug whole on a dare and then was afflicted with an 8-year-long paralysis and deadly disease that eventually took his life. This is a tragic case, but the slug is technically not to blame here, as Sam actually came down with a parasitic worm known as rat lungworm that slugs and snails can sometimes pick up from rats' feces after devouring it, and humans can contract after eating undercooked slugs and snails. Rat lungworm is a disgusting parasitic worm that lodges itself into the lungs of the creatures that it afflicts, most likely, as its name would suggest, rats. And now with this, we have transferred to our next tier, the worm tier. Yes, besides rat lungworm, there are 5 terrifying parasitic worms that I neglected to cover in the previous iceberg. And one worm, actually, 4 parasitic worms, and one worm which is not parasitic, but is potentially the single most terrifying living creature on planet Earth. And I can't wait for you all to learn about that. Starting off with the umbrella term maggots, because I think if I hadn't included it, I'm afraid that people would go through the video and say, hey, you forgot maggots. But the thing is, Maggots is not a specific species of worm. It's the term used to refer to the larval form of any type of fly. So, interestingly, maggots can be parasitic, as a botfly larva is a maggot, but they can also not be parasitic, as something like a common fruit fly larva is also considered to be a maggot. Heartworms are one of the saddest cases of parasitic worm I think any living creature can become afflicted with. Thankfully, human beings are not subject to be infected by heartworms, but pet dogs often are after being bit by mosquitoes carrying the worm's larval form. And the image of hearts infected with heartworm is one of the most jarring things that I've ever seen. After the heartworm larva is implanted into the creature's heart, heartworms grow out of control and envelop the heart absolutely, which can be fatal. But thankfully, veterinarians have developed several methods of defense for pet dogs against the influence of a heartworm infection. Whipworm is a tiny parasitic worm known for its supposedly whip-like shape, and it's another one that can infect dogs and other pets. But unfortunately, this time it can infect us human beings as well, if we eat contaminated soil, the most likely cause. When a person becomes afflicted with whipworm, the worm will lodge itself into their intestinal tract and rapidly reproduce, causing tons of digestive issues. Now, whipworm can be treated effectively within 1 to 3 days, but if the problem is left to fester, it can cause tons of complications, especially in children, as there are cases of children's physical growth and cognitive development becoming slowed and stunted due to a prolonged whipworm infection. Anchorworm is a species of aquatic crustacean parasitic worm, although really only the female of the species is parasitic, as after coming of age and mating with the male, the female will lodge itself into a fish's body to absorb nutrients and become reproductively active. The anchorworm can appear anywhere on the fish's body, but it is most common for it to appear in the fish's eye, being quite reminiscent visually of the Loa Loa that can afflict us human beings. The anchorworm can also appear in the fish's gills, causing respiratory issues. At its front, despite the rest of its worm-like body, the anchorworm has a crustacean hook-like appendage that causes it to firmly lodge into a fish when it infects it, making it very hard for the anchorworm to be removed by aquarium owners and people caring for sick fish. Okay, here we go. You know how in science fiction it's like a common trope that scientists will accidentally or purposefully create some kind of apex predator or ultimate life form and then immediately regret it? Well, I'm here to tell you that that's not fiction at all, because God has already created a creature like that, and I'm sure if he's looking down on us now, he regrets it. It's called the bobbit worm. See, the bobbit worm is a marine worm that lives at an average depth of around 300 feet underwater, which, thankfully, it's nowhere near to any of us. It moves around and lives underneath the surface of the ocean floor, and that's where it stays during the day to hunt its prey. It will exist underneath the ocean floor slightly underground and have antennae positioned towards the water so that it can sense its prey, and then once it senses it, it immediately shuts out with its massive mandibles, grasps it, and then just plunges underground like something straight out of a horror movie, as you can see in this footage. And if any of us did happen to come in contact with the bobbit worm, we would unfortunately find that its entire body is lined and barbed with an incredibly potent neurotoxin that can paralyze human beings for life. In fact, any human being that has accidentally introduced a bobbit worm to an aquarium environment using rocks laced with its larva has immediately come to regret it, as the bobbit worm is known to annihilate every other life form present within a day. And the worst part? It's fucking 10 feet long. And finally, we have arrived together at the true last tier of the Bugs and Parasites iceberg. You know, the thing about bugs and parasites throughout mythology is that they're never shown in a positive light. They're almost always a negative influence, such as the swarm of locusts described as a punishment in the Bible. But there are sparse examples of bugs being worshipped, the most prescient of which is the scarab beetle in ancient Egyptian mythology. There, the scarab beetle was seen as a symbol of life, death, and the cycle of rebirth, heavily associated with the culture's most powerful deity, Osiris. Then we have the legendary cryptid bugs, the most famous of which is, of course, Point Pleasant's Mothman, a creature described to appear in the mid-19th century in the United States in Virginia, always signifying a sighting with the forecast of a disaster. Next up, the question, can a human being become a parasite? I don't mean this in the kind of edgelord Matrix way where, like, can we have a net negative effect on the planet and each other, or even in an emotional kind of narcissistic abuse sense. I mean literally, physically, can a human being act parasitically on other human beings? Well, according to the evidence in this Reddit post that has become very infamous over the years, it seems that human beings can, and one human being at least has transcended into a parasitic creature. The disturbing post appeared on Reddit's confession board and read as follows. My obsession hurts others around me. It's also my fetish, but it goes far deeper than that. I'll try to explain the obsession the best I can by explaining how it started. Basically, when I was young, I caught pinworms. It was a strange feeling and the itch was painful. My parents took me to the doctor and I got medication to cure it. This event is what sparked my obsession. The thought that my body could be their whole world, their lifeline, almost a planet of sorts. It was so interesting. After that, I began researching pinworms and other parasites, and I found out that the human body already hosts parasites, such as Demodex on their eyelashes. I wanted to know how many a human body could endure without a chance of serious health issues. This curiosity has plagued my mind for years. I'm now 25, but I'm very well versed in parasites, as I've been studying them for over 10 years. I also purposefully infect myself with non-lethal parasites because it's part of a fetish of mine. Some have worked better than others. Quite a few have given me serious diarrhea and fevers, while others have been much more bearable. I currently have pinworms and tapeworms, various non-pathogenic protozoa, and pubic lice. I am incredibly masochistic, so although it's uncomfortable, I do feel pleasure from it. All these parasites mean I need to eat a lot more than the average person and I still look thin, and to be quite honest, it means I can enjoy so much more food than most people. I also keep multiple cultures of bedbugs and leeches in containers and allow them to feed on my blood sometimes, although those kinds are not really my passion as they do not live primarily on the human body, but I think they're interesting nonetheless, and I find them pretty cute. Now it's time for the confession. My obsession and fetish isn't just about infecting myself anymore. I also have the desire to infect others, and I've acted on those desires. Sometimes my parasites just pioneer to new lands on their own. My family have caught pinworms multiple times without my intention, and other times I purposefully spread them. I have infected strangers, friends, and even my own family. I know it's bad, but I just can't stop. I think I have parasites in my brain that make me feel like I need to spread them. I know how crazy that sounds, but if you knew the feeling, you'd understand. Maybe it's just a mental illness, or maybe its origin is parasitic in nature. I really don't know. All I know is it feels good when I do these things. I have an intense need to spread my children, and when I do, I feel pleasure. I must have spread thousands of my children over the years. I sometimes sprinkle tapeworm eggs into people's drinks when I'm out at clubs. I also caught pubic lice from sex with a random woman I met at the same club, and in return I'm pretty sure I gave her pinworms, so it was a fair trade. The woman wasn't even attractive, I just wanted to gift her some pinworms, and instead I basically won the jackpot by sleeping with her. I then spread my pubic lice to at least 4 other women.
Sometimes I also sprinkle worm eggs into food at buffets whenever I visit them. I understand you would think it's gross and messed up. I am basically betraying my species for my children. It's hard. I do enjoy people and I have wonderful friends and family, but I also love my parasites. And my fetish is just too hard to control. I don't want to hurt anyone when I do these things, but a force beyond my understanding me is driving me to do them. I think I could possibly have a parasite in my brain that has not yet been discovered. I'm sorry to all the people I have caused discomfort to, but it's for a cause beyond human understanding. Although this all can be justifiable, I still feel guilt. I don't want to hurt anyone. I hope the people I spread my gift to can find it in their hearts to be a little more open-minded and not kill my children, but learn to live with them like I have instead. I'm aware how strange and disgusting others will find me if they knew. I'm aware of how immoral this seems to most people. I assume you may see me in a negative light after reading this, but remember, I only want what's best for my children, and if you were truly in my shoes, I'm sure you would do the same.
And finally, is it possible that a parasite exists above us in outer space? Well, according to an article in the Tech Times, scientists have found trace evidence of anaerobic parasites that can survive without oxygen and